boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pawn Boss, coming at you live from the North Texas offices of Pawn Boss Magazine. Good to see you guys checking in. Looks like we got 7 folks. Adam Chandler, the Saunders are up. Good to see you guys. Tonight's topic, I thought I'd talk a little bit about planning and due diligence, because I've had several things happen just not long ago that make me want to talk about that topic. Plus, Leanne thought it was a good topic too. Actually, she's the one that said, you know, you really need to be the one talking about that tonight. I see John Petros checking in. Hey, John, I called my buddy Bucky Lanehart up in upstate New York and told him you were coming, so I got a feeling he's going to want to check in with you when you get up there, buddy. So, welcome everybody. You know the drill. Hashtag Pawn Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pawn Boss hat and a Pawn Boss mug. Say it, Jacob West, that knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Glad to see you guys and gals. Let me see here. I'm going to see if I can do what I do and find it so I can see your thoughts and questions. And, oh, there it is right there. Yeah, holy cow, we got 34 people. That's pretty good for this little old show. Good to see you guys. Okay, now let me see what's going on here. Tommy Garrett from Dallas, Georgia, checking in. New subscriber. Hey, thanks for subscribing. I see Mike Cottrell. Jason Nipstad up. Absolutely. Got to talk a little bit with Jason. Jason, I'm going to start working on your habitat map over the weekend and see if we can get that ball moving a little bit more. And I'd like to have a conversation with you. Andy Edding, it's good to see you. Do that hashtag Pawn Boss Magazine. There's Scoog checking in. Kim Moore. Let's see here. I already said hi to the Saunders. There's Ken Dwaggins, Tommy Garrett, we said hello to. Mike Cottrell, Zach Bollinger from Indiana, as I recall. Vito Barnes checking in. David Schneiderman, Easy Docs. David, I got your email. I hadn't had a chance to respond to it. I've been up to my elbows. Fred Bingaman. Fred, Connie, good to see you guys. They're from Illinois. Here's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about due diligence. If you're getting ready to do something with your pond or your lake, in order to make a good decision, you really need to have a great idea of what the consequences are going to be. And those consequences need to be something that you want. Now, I know it's easy to say that, but sometimes it's not easy to do that. I'm helping several people right now design brand new lakes, and they've never done it, so they don't know what they don't know. And my good friend Freeman Sawyer, who's also a client, checks in on this show pretty often, but he and I spent some time together, and I was talking about, you know, renovating a lake, or talking about moving dirt, or talking about stocking fish. And he said, you know, if you can help me avoid paying the dumb tax, I don't want to pay the dumb tax. And that term struck me, because I can't tell you how many times I go to somebody's property, visit with them a little bit, and come to find out they probably spent money in ways they shouldn't have. Then they didn't spend money in ways they should have. And it's just because you don't know. So doing some homework before you do things is a pretty smart idea. And of course, it's really, I mean, when you're dealing with nature, it's not that easy to totally understand the consequences. Like I see Frank James checking in from Louisiana. Harrison Davis is the hardest working man. There you go. I love that. John Funk, good to see you. Matthew Thiessen. But anyway, the dumb tax, Travis Paul Smith. Good to see Travis, one of our Aquamax fans. Brad Newsom, I'm fine. How are you? So what Freeman was talking about was in terms of the dumb tax is, for example, if you're going to put up a fence, how do you know where it should go? How much should you be paying? And I can't tell you how many times I've met somebody that lives in the city that has bought land in the country, and they're being taken advantage of by some of those local contractors because they don't know how to play the game. So before you start making decisions, it's a wise idea to seek some counsel and some wisdom from somebody that's been there, done that. Find somebody that did what you're getting ready to do. And there's a lot of folks out there Dave Weber, on this line of thinking, got the idea this week. You and Otto should co-author a book titled 1001 Pond Mistakes. I don't know if that's enough. There's a lot of them out there. Hey, there's Michael Gray. Michael's he got to be sitting in an air-conditioned cab of a Traco, either pounding on rock or slinging clay somewhere over in Tennessee. All right, looks like John Funk, he's got his bluegill or bullheads and channel catfish going on. But a classic example of what I'm talking about is, here's a little factoid. 1 acre, 1 foot deep of dry material is 1,666 cubic yards. If it costs $3 to $4 per yard to move that dirt, you can do the math. So if you take your pond 1 foot deeper than it should have been or needed to be or ought to be, you're going to be paying the dump tax. So the more you can know about what you're getting ready to do, whether it's stocking fish or doing a survey or enlarging a pond or whatever you're going to do, I think it's really, really smart to do your due diligence. Now, where do you get it? Of course, I'm going to tell you to get it from Pond Boss. Pond Boss that's the very first place to go. Come to the Facebook page, come to the Pond Boss discussion forum. There's guys there that don't have an agenda. They're not trying to say something. They just want to help you be better at what you're going to do. There's Larry Lake checking in from East Texas. I thought I saw there's Willie Howell, my neighbor. Good to see you. Danny Max checking in from San Antonio. Willie's checking in today. I think he's over somewhere around Texarkana. Howard District, what do you think of a pond full of green sunfish when you want bass? I'll tell you this. I think you need bass instead of green sunfish. I'll tell you a story about that here in a minute. Let me circle back to that. Travis Paul Smith, since I followed you November of 2019, I've made many improvements on my pond. No more dumb tax for this Cajun. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're doing it that way, because dumb tax is not a good tax. I tell you what, we'll just circle back to Howard's question, and I'll talk to you about that. A long time ago, I'd say 25 years ago, I would tell, if somebody said, hey, Bob, I got a pond full of green sunfish and I want bass, what do I need to do? I'd say, you know what? Let's kill those green sunfish, restock with fathead minnows, bluegill, red-eared sunfish, build the food chain, then stock some bass. But that's not what I do now. If I can go in there and see that those green sunfish, there's, say, 5 different sizes, little guys, medium size, bigger, I know this. In almost every pond or lake where they live, they're only going to spawn 1 time a year. Bluegill are going to spawn 3 to 5 times a year, depending where you are. Now, John Funk, you might get two bluegill spawns a year up there in mid-Michigan. You know, you might get 1. Depends on the shape your bluegills are in. If you're feeding them properly, you're going to get 2 spawns. So now what I figured out was if we look at those green sunfish, and they're stunted and they're overcrowded, most of them are going to be about 3 inches long, which is the perfect size for a 10 to 12 inch bass. So that's when I go to the fish farm or fish hatchery and start shopping. Say, hey guys, you got any 10 to 14 inch largemouth bass? I need 20 per acre. I want to get some F1 tiger bass, maybe a few Florida bass. And we're going to stock 20 per acre of those and let them feed on those green sunfish and turn those green sunfish into bass flesh. And then at the same time we do that, I want to stock some 5 to 7 inch long bluegills, feed the heck out of them, and about 18 months later, you're going to see the numbers of those green sunfish going up and the bluegill numbers going down. Green sunfish numbers going down, bluegill numbers going up, and then they're going to cross paths. And after about 3 years, the green sunfish are going to be mostly gone except for a remnant population. Now, if you kill the green sunfish, there's no guarantees they won't come back, because where'd they come from in the first place? If somebody stocked them, that's one thing. Odds are not high that somebody stocked them. They showed up from the watershed, which means even if you do kill them, odds are pretty good that they're going to come back. So if you can just overwhelm them, with some largemouth bass to feed on them as you rebuild or build a bluegill food chain, that's a smart thing to do. And then you're not paying for the rotenone. The money that you would have spent on rotenone, you could be spending on fish and catching bass sooner. And then in the second year, once the green sunfish numbers have gone down and the bluegill numbers are coming up, make sure that your bass are spawning. And if they're spawning, you're good to go. If they're not, I'd go buy some fingerlings that next spring and stock your next size class of bass to get them going. So that's a classic example of what I'm talking about with doing due diligence. If you understand the way green sunfish live, the way they spawn, what they eat. Now, green sunfish, their mouth is about 3 times as big as a bluegill's. So they're going to outcompete bluegill for food, but what they can't do is they can't outcompete their reproduction. And when you have a top-end predator like largemouth bass feeding on them and eating those green sunfish, the green sunfish can't keep up over the long haul. They just can't reproduce enough. All right, Tommy Gary says, speaking of due diligence, we have a brand new 1.25 acre pond, and we're stocking copper-nosed bluegill and red ear sunfish from American Sport Fish in October, and tiger bass and pure Florida's next May. What are your thoughts on all female bass? You know, I've done that. And I'll tell you my thoughts on this. With all female largemouth bass, first of all, they got to be big enough that you can sex them. And the guys at American Sport Fish are telling me they can sex them at 6 to 8 inches long. But what that means is those fish are producing eggs at that size. So if you can get them from 6 to 8 inches long, and you can verify that they're females, give it a try, because you don't have to live with it if you don't want to. If it doesn't work for you, then you can change it easily by adding some males later. But here's my experience with female-only largemouth bass ponds. When you stock those bass, especially if you're stocking adult bass, and for the most part, that's what you're going to get, are adult bass. Now, I've said on this broadcast a number of times, I'm going to hammer this home as much as I can. Out of 100 bass that you move from one scenario to another, the further they are into adulthood, the higher the odds are they won't convert to that new habitat, no matter what. Doesn't matter how much food there is, doesn't matter what the water's like. Just some of them grow up in that environment over there, and if they're 2 pounds or 3 pounds and you bring them from over there to over here, odds are really high that they're not going to do well. Now, here's what those odds are. 20 to 30% of them are going to thrive and do fine. So out of 100, that's 20 or 30 of them they're going to do fine. There's going to be another 20 that'll be average or above average. The other 50 are going to deteriorate, and they're going to be taking up space, eating food, and not adding to the fishery. Plus, with an all-female bass lake, one thing that I think is real important is recruitment. If you're not adding more bass each year of a smaller size class, then there's going to be some weird things happen that you don't even think about. One of those is you're going to get stuck with a certain size class of bluegill that are too big to be eaten or not big enough to be eaten, because your females are going to be feeding on certain sizes of bluegill or certain sizes of threadfin shad. So, it's nature's way to have boys and girls in a pond so they can reproduce, and you can have a seesaw going on with the forage fish compared to the game fish. And that's what typically happens. But when you take that equation or that part of the equation out, and you have a bunch of females that are growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then your food chain is going to just kind of hover a little bit. And there's going to be size classes in that food chain that disappear. Now, the second thing that's going to happen that's a little frustrating is the bigger those bass get, the bigger those girls get, the more cautious they are, the harder they are to catch. So your catch rates are not going to stay high. Once they hit about 4 pounds or 5 pounds, you can have them packed in there like cordwood, and your catch rates are still not going to be different than if you had a normal lake of males and females for your catch rates of bigger fish. So there's 3 key points about females only. One is you need to have a plan for recruitment. Number 2 is you need to be sure that you don't see any voids in your food chain, which means electrofishing, surveys every year or every other year. And then the third thing is know that your catch rates are going to drop as those girls get bigger. Now, you bet you may go out and have a great chance of catching a 13-pound bass, but if you get one bite all day, how fun is that? So that's why it's important that you recruit each year. You want bass of all the variety of sizes, all the way from full-grown double-digit girls, down to the 2-pounders, to the 3-pounders, to the 16 inches and, 10s, 9s, 8s, all the way down. Only way you can do that in a female-only pond is to stock them in there, which I'm not opposed to that at all. Let's see here. let me see what else we got here. Then we'll circle back to that topic here again. All right. Brad Rom, howdy. Dion Myers, howdy. Replying now, thanks so much. Let's see here. Oops, let me back up here. Back up here. Greenies are 2 to 7 inches here in Bedford County, Tennessee. 1 acre pond, feeding them for October bass. What a feast. Yep, that'll be a feast, because what you'll see is those 7 inchers won't get eaten. One thing I didn't say a while ago about green sunfish, they don't live that long. 3 to 5 years is old for a green sunfish. You know, I've seen some that are 8 years old, but that's a grandpa, and they're not reproducing. Travis said, I sent you an email, but I'll ask it here. I have a ½ acre pond. I want to enlarge to 1.5 acres. The existing pond is 5 feet deep. I want to use the pond to feed F1s to put in my 15-acre pond. What depth should I dig? New addition, considering some. You need it to be, and okay, I'll tell you this, Travis. If you can put water in and take water out, so if you can pump water in from the lake and then flow it back into the lake, if you can exchange water, it doesn't need to be any deeper than about 6 or 7 feet. Now, if you can aerate it, that would even be better. But I love the idea of taking some young of the year bass, feeding them up, and taking the best of the best and moving them right next door. Do that within 18 months. Don't wait 3 years to do that, to move those fish, because by that time, their plasticity has gotten them accustomed to living in that pond rather than that lake. So do that for about 18 months, then move them over, which I think that's a great idea. And I must have not seen your email yet. Whenever I'm off away from my computer for a couple of days, it just goes nuts and I get way behind. Okay, Nathan Barber. Hi, boss. What's the minimum percent of protein we should be running in our feeders? I'm feeding a sport fish pellet that's 36%. Nathan, it depends on your goals. If you're wanting to supplement what Mother Nature offers, that 36% grain-based fish food like a game fish chow, that's a good one. Or catfish food, that's a good one. But if you're really wanting to expedite growth rates and put some weight on some fish, especially bluegills or feed train largemouth bass, they need to eat a higher protein fish meal-based fish food. Now read the tag. If you're wanting to grow big fish, big bluegills especially, the very first thing on the tag should be fish meal. It shouldn't say soybean meal or chicken meal or something, and some of the feeds have that. But if you really want to grow big fish, it needs to be fish meal based. My voice is going crazy, guys. I've had a dry throat the last few days. Okay, so I want to go back to the dumb tax, and you guys throw me some questions. Like, for example, I'm working with a guy up in Oklahoma who's getting ready to build about a 6 or 7 acre pond. He's got a great place for it. Bought it because of the view. He bought it because of the lake site. He's ready to build a lake. He hired an engineer to come out and take some soil samples. So they did some core samples 12 feet deep along where the dam is going to be sited. The soils were terrible. Now, they didn't really talk to him about that, but it was all silty loam and sandy loam and silty sand, not with minimal amount of clay in it. So he hadn't read his soil report. He had not looked at his engineer report. So he sat down and went over all that. And the engineer recommended that the dam be built with that dirt, but using a process that the contractor better know how to do. And that process is to core down to good bedrock or good solid material, and then start coming back up with that mediocre material or poor material, and then core it, and then come back into the core trench and compact clay with bentonite or another amendment that's compactable, and basically build an underground wall in the middle of the dam as the dam is being built. So picture in your mind this dam, and then in the middle of the dam, there's a wall of dirt that goes all the way from way down into bedrock, all the way almost to the top of the dam, above where the water line is going to be. And you got to have a pretty good contractor that's been there and done that. So as we talked, I said, you know, that your contractor may want to bid it based on finding clay a half a mile away, because he's going to go look for clay, which I would encourage that. Go look for clay. See if you can find clay and see the proximity of that clay to where the dam site is. And he's got a couple of high spots where they didn't dig any core trenches that look like there's some pretty good clay there to me. So if they go and take a backhoe and dig some holes and they find clay, then if it's not too far to move it, he needs to compare apples to apples. Compare what it's going to take to build the dam as the engineer designed it, or what would it cost to build the dam out of good clay material tied into both hillsides. And the proximity of that clay compared to the dam design that the engineer's coming up with. There can be a dumb tax thing right there, and that dumb tax could jump up into 6 figures. So be smart with it. I was talking to a guy yesterday that was looking at buying a piece of property, and he wanted me to take a minute and look on Google Earth and see if there was a dam site. So I climbed on Google Earth and found the property with him, talking to him on the phone, pulled up the topography of it, and then I saw a pretty good site. I saw 3 pretty good sites. I said, okay, you've got one over here where the dam could be maybe 280 to 300 feet long, 20 feet tall, and impound about 6 acres of water. So he said, well, what do you think that would cost? I said, man, nobody knows what it's going to cost because you don't know what's going on underground, but I'll give you an idea. So I started figuring out the cubic yards of dirt with a 3-to-1 slope on the inside and a 4-to-1 slope on the backside, a 12-foot crown on top. A core trench that was going down maybe 12 feet. And that's just a guess based on where he is in central Texas. And I said, that lake's probably going to cost somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. And I could hear him wince on the phone. Ooh, boy, I don't know if I want to spend that much. And I said, well, I've said this before, but I said it to him. I said, have you priced a tricked out bass boat? Well, no. Well, I'll tell you what, spend a little time online, you're going to find out that a tricked out bass boat's $80,000. You're not going to pull it with that pickup you're driving. You're going to get another pickup. So pretty soon you're going to have $120,000 to $140,000 in equipment that when you pull off the lot is going to lose at least 25% of its value, and it's going to depreciate. If you spend $80,000 to $100,000 on a 6-acre lake, 8-acre lake, and you have it for 15 or 20 years, and you get ready to sell that property, you've added value to that property, and you're not waiting in line at the boat ramp. You're not getting out on the water to see somebody fishing in your spot. You're going to have your lake on your property that you can do with as you see fit. Nobody's going to be jerking 10-pound bass out of your spot at Lake Fork. They're going to be leaving you alone while you're doing what you want to do with your water. So when it was put in that perspective, he thought it was a little bit more reasonable to do. I think his biggest deal was he was going to talk to his wife about it. And I said, dude, buy her a couch or get her a nicer car. All right, so let's see here. Get back up a little bit. Steve says, sound like you got a cold, Bob. I'll tell you what I've got. I think, some kind of allergy to pollen or something. And I've slept with my mouth open the last couple of nights, and I don't have enough water in here while I'm doing this. I got a little bit. I do have a little whiskey. I might have to do that in a minute and calm it down. That sounds like a good idea, maybe a little whiskey. All right, let's see here. All right, Mike Cottrell, is Munster the closest place to Palo Pinto to buy F1 bass, and how well will they travel if I go pick them up? Palo Pinto County, you know what? If you call American Sport Fish, they're hauling fish to Palo Pinto County. And I know they've got some orders lined up. Just call the American Sport Fish office, 903-564-5372, and ask to talk to Walter. Or send an email to me and I'll forward it to them. But I do know that they're going to be bringing fish through there. So, and they'll work it out with you. They probably take them, if I recall, don't you live in Fort Worth? I don't remember, Mike, but I know that several of the fish hatcheries deliver, and American Sport Fish delivers. All right, let me see what else we got here. Nathan Barber, thanks for the answer on protein. I recently fished Wolf Creek Dam on the runoff side. Had a fish cleaning station with a grinder that ran back into the Cumberland River, grinding the leftovers. Is that a good idea for a cleaning station on a pond? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. If you want to grind up the leftovers, if something is in there that will eat them, then that's a good idea. But if there's not, then it's not a good idea. I would rather see you take those leftovers, grind them up, and put them into a compost pile. Because if you don't have predator fish or some fish that are accustomed to eating those, then they're going to fall in the bottom of the pond and pile up and then decompose. And that's going to add more waste byproducts and waste things into your water. Now, that's somewhat based on how big your pond is. If it's a 30-acre lake, you're not going to do any harm. But if you got a 1-acre pond and you catch 10 fish and you grind up the carcasses and they don't break down for 3 or 4 weeks, then you got a problem. And if somebody's wading over there and they step on a spine that's been crunched into a piece about that big that's in their foot, So there's several things that I don't, where it makes it not a good idea. One of the standard answers for that is you don't really want to be putting fish back in the pond in case they've got a parasite. I kind of poo-poo that nowadays, because if they've got a parasite, they've already got a parasite. So you're not going to do anything with it. Just don't bring any fish from there to here to do that. Let's see here. Trey Carpenter says, I wish I had $1 for every pond built in the hill country that didn't hold water. Boy, isn't that the truth? Especially if you're in an area where the soils are suspect, do your due diligence, because you want to be fishing a pond, not mowing it. And I have seen some ponds where people have to mow the pond because it doesn't hold water. Other due diligence to do is to understand your fish stocking rates. If you understand why you've been told to stock this many fish and wait for this amount of time to stock the predator fish, if you understand that, it's going to be a lot easier to buy into that decision. Due diligence. Another one is, but one thing that drives me nuts is bucket biology. Bucket biology. That's when you build a pond, the neighbor sees the dozers going, you show up, neighbor comes over, wants to know what you're doing. He's all excited because he's going to have a new friend with a new fishing hole. He says, hey, when it fills up, I'll bring you some of my bass I need to call out of my pond. No. Why would you want somebody else's calls? On a rare occasion, it can make sense to move fish from one pond to another, but for the most part, it doesn't make any sense, because you want to build your pond's ecosystem on its own merits. Another one of my pet peeves is when somebody overspends their budget on dirt work, which happens. Let me tell you how many times that happens. Every time. Every time somebody builds a pond, they spend more money on it than they planned, because there's unknowns. You don't know what's going to happen when the dirt is moved. And that happens with almost every single pond I've ever seen. Well, Bob, listen, we went over budget on dirt, so I got to cut my budget back on fish. No, don't do that. Do it right. You spent the money. You spent more money than you thought to get it like you want it. Stock it like it needs to be stocked. I don't care if you got to dig into the kids' trust fund. Stock it like it needs to be stocked. You'll be glad you did 3 years down the road. You're not going to be calling me and wanting to undo the pickle that you did because you didn't want to spend an extra $1,500 or whatever it was. All right. Guys, I don't know how long this voice is going to last. We'll just go till it quits. Travis Spallsmith, that's what I tell my brother all the time when he questions why I do things to my property. There you go. Tom, let us know when you might be speaking in the St. Louis area. Would love to meet you. You know what, Tom? Whenever I go back to St. Louis, I'll post it or get the girls to post it on this Facebook page and let everybody know. Right now, I'm kind of cutting back on travels a little bit just to be safe. It's not with this damn virus going around. I don't want to catch it, but also I don't know what's true. We're in an election year. I don't think anybody knows the truth. And if they do, they're not telling it. You hear this epidemiologist say one thing, you hear that epidemiologist say something totally contradictory, and they're both credible people. So who's right? So I'm kind of scaling back on travel a little bit. Now, I don't mind driving to St. Louis because 9 hours and I get some of my best ideas looking through the windshield as I'm going to somewhere like that. But next time I tell you what, if I've got speaking engagements, I'll share it on this Facebook page. Okay, Mike, Fort Worth. Yep, I would just call American Sport Fish and visit with them. They'll talk to you. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what, Walter Bassano, their business manager, he lives in Benbrook. So there's a real good chance that he could bag up some fish and bring them to you, when they're moving fish again, and get some fish to you where you can take them out to Palapena County. Let's see here. What Chris Miller's asking, what strains of bass would you put into a new pond in southern Indiana? Well, when you say strains of bass, I'm going to presume you're asking about largemouth. I wouldn't hesitate to stock smallmouth, but remember this, you got to have the right kind of habitat for those fish to do real well. You see this mug? Look here, knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Pond Boss hat. Click like. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments. Share this video to your timeline. In the meantime, I think I've got some cough syrup right down here. Oh, yep, there's a little bit of Clyde Mays cough syrup. So I don't have any honey, and I don't have any lemon, but I have just a little bitty bit of Clyde Mays cough syrup. So y'all bear with me, because I'm going to see if I can. Ooh, boy, that smells pretty. Man, ooh, that's pretty strong. Usually, this is, Chris Blood taught me how to make old fashions out of that whiskey, and that's kind of why I had it sitting back. But we're going to put a little bit on this throat. Whoa. Woo. Okay, so now, oh yeah, that's much better. Let's see here. Wyatt, good to see you, Wyatt. I don't remember seeing you on here. Glad to see you here with us now. I worked on a planning project with you and several of the South Dakota State students a number of years ago. Did Mr. Mitchell ever take any of our propositions into consideration to help him grow larger bass in his main pond? Yes, he did. Brian Greb can tell you all about that. Mr. Mitchell made a gigantic commitment, and South Dakota State University students and Dr. Greb did the homework and figured out that there's a certain density of habitat that needs to be added to a lake if the habitat's low to increase productivity. Because here's where you're going, and this is the main point here. If you had a lake, say 100-acre lake, and bass fishing was mediocre, and you could catch a few fish, and you had the means to where you could increase habitat to where it covered 25% to 30% of the lake bottom at different depths with different types of habitat to increase the productivity, would you? You bet you would. Well, the question has always been, man, I don't know how much I need. So what Dr. Greb and Dr. Willis started it with me. Dr. Greb took it on and finished it. Was they wanted to quantify what the difference between habitat, structure, cover in terms of it being fish attractors rather than increasing the productivity of the lake. And what they figured out in that lake, which is 125 acres, is the density of the new habitat, which was almost all mossback fish structures, fish habitat, was 25% coverage of the entire lake bottom. That's when it turned the corner and productivity started going up. And the thing about having structure in the lake, man, I might have to have a little bit more of that cough syrup. Woo. Whoa. Was that up until it was about 20%, you couldn't really tell a difference. But one thing that started happening as they got close to 25% was they started seeing phytoplankton and periphyton production go up. Because on that under that underwater structure cover, those mossbacks started to grow algae and periphyton on it, which attracted small bait fish, which attracted bigger bait fish, which attracted insects and bigger fish around these big fish cities that are under the water. So they were able to figure out, which I kind of knew this all along, they confirmed it, was if you have some kind of structure in the water column itself vertically, you can add to the food chain. Whereas most lakes that are void of habitat, the water column itself is not that productive. But if you can add substrate in the water column to make it more productive, you're going to see productivity go up. So the answer to that question, Wyatt, is yes, he did. All right, so there's Skoog again. Ordered Otto's book. Man, you're going to do that. Bob, Bob, can you stop nutrient accumulation in a new and clean pond with harvest alone? That's a great question. I'm going to tell you no, you can't stop nutrient accumulation. Now, what you can do is if you've got good wetland plants or one of my favorites, it's a little pricey, but pretty dadgum good, are some of the floating islands that Bruce Kanya manufactures up in Shepherd, Montana. The more nutrients you can convert to flesh, the better and more productive that body of water is going to be. Going back to the mossbacks, with the mossbacks there producing periphyton, the periphyton is consuming nutrients that's dissolved in the water column, converting it into something that something can eat, whether it's Daphnia or whether it's, grazers of some sort, small insects, dragonfly nymphs, damselfly nymphs, things like that, helgramites. When they're feeding on that, then that offers up a new niche in the food chain. So here's the answer I'm going to give you, Skoog, is if you can fill the majority of your niches with vehicles that can convert nutrients, meaning that when you've got plankton in the upper couple of feet, you've got something that can filter that plankton, like threadfin shad, for example. And then you've got vertical structure with substrate that gizzard shad can feed on, bluegill can feed on, grass shrimp can graze on. And then you've got benthic, where you've got suckers that can feed on it, things like that. If you're working to fill each niche, you're going to have less nutrient accumulation over a long period of time. Now, what a pond likes to do with excess nutrients is convert it to plants. So when you get a lot of nutrients that are flowing into a pond and they settle to the bottom, then you're going to get things like bushy pondweed, you're going to get leafy pondweed, you might even get coontail, and that's going to absorb some nutrients. So then if you have nutrients being converted into plants and you've got fish that can eat the plants, like tilapia can eat filamentous algae, grass carp can feed on the rooted plants. When the grass carp eat it, they convert to their flesh, but then they reconvert nutrients back into solution into the pond to help generate the plankton bloom. So the more plankton bloom you can create, the more that can be converted to flesh. But you're still going to get nutrient accumulation because that's the way it is. And because I'm telling you, that's just the way it is. There's Clark Cole. Had a fun little text conversation with Clark earlier this week. Bob, I've discovered thousands of tiny holes in the bottom of my pond in 2 to 3 feet of water. What's doing this? Okay. I got several things going through my mind. There's thousands of tiny holes. Now, depending on how big the holes are, I've seen crawfish holes, but they're going to be, 2 inches in diameter down to 3/4 of an inch in diameter. You can ask those Cajuns about that. But then if you see little bitty tiny holes in organic matter, that's probably some kind of nymphs of some sort, roundworms, I'm trying to think of the insects. Somebody help me out. There's an insect that's kind of like a gnat that comes out of the water. They'll bite the hell out of you. The bottom of the pond is often teeming with worms, especially where there's oxygen. So those holes could be coming from insects that are burrowing out and hatching. Mayflies do that. You can see little bitty holes in the water sometimes where mayflies have emerged, come up, fed, and then hatched and flew away. All right, let's see. Cheers to Chauncey and to Travis. Some Coca-Cola would go with good. Yeah, you know what? I don't have any Coca-Cola. I'd have to get up and go to the refrigerator. I wasn't thinking about all that. So just going straight, so to speak. Tommy Garrett. Last question, Bob. My new pond does have a little sulfur smell near the dock. Any idea what that could be? Yes, that sulfur smell is a byproduct of aerobic decomposition or composting of organic matter. So what it is, that's hydrogen sulfide gas. So as organic matter breaks down underwater in the presence of oxygen, it's going to give off that hydrogen sulfide. And then when you step on it, that gas releases and leaves the water. That's one of the things I love about water. The reason you smell it is it's leaving. So that's one of the byproducts of composting. Hello, John Wilson. Good to see you, brother. Travis says, all the info you gave me in March, I put 28 yards of pea gravel, made beds like you instructed. The beds are full of brim and shell crackers. I love it when things work. If it doesn't work, don't tell me. All right, let's see here. Chauncey says, do I need to stock fathead minnows? Uh-oh, I lost it there. Something did. Chauncey says, do I need to stock fathead minnows in my established pond every year? No. On the contrary, don't stock fatheads ever after the first year and a half of a pond. You know, fathead minnows, their job, their role is to provide the first year's growth of predator fish. And that's what they do. Once they've been eaten, they can't reestablish. And as expensive as they are, you know, $10 to $12 a pound for fathead minnows, you could take that money, spend it on fish food to grow your own bait fish, such as bluegill. And if you do that, you're going to have way more bait fish than even if you bought the fatheads. See, Jeremy Duckworth, good to see you. Let's see, midge flies. That's it. That's what I was thinking about, midge flies. When I'm talking about the little red worms that come up out of the bottom, those are midge flies. That's it. I knew one of you guys knew this stuff. You got me. That's good. Okay, so now if you got more questions, throw them at me. I do want to stop and pause for a minute and say thanks to Purina Mills for sponsoring this show. Had a great conversation with David Nelson. He's getting ready to do some promotions with some Gamefish Chow. More Aquamax. He wants to do more promotions with the Aquamax lineup. So here in the next few weeks, David Nelson and I with Purina Mills are going to get together and we're going to have a conversation about the Aquamax lineup, because I'm really fighting for you guys to get good feeds, and which they've got, you know, but what we got to do is we got to make it more available or see if we need to tweak it, you know, and so David wants to get it marketed and get it out there in front of you guys more. So we're getting ready to work on that to make sure it's more available. Some dealers aren't educated. We're going to educate more dealers. So I want to thank Purina Mills for helping sponsor this show. Texas Hunter Feeders, same thing. By the way, look at here. I got some Texas Hunter hats in the mail. Chris Blood sent some, and he said on my next drawing, he said send him a Pond Boss hat and a Texas Hunter hat. So we'll have another drawing here pretty quick, and probably it won't be next week. I won't be here next week. I'll be in my vehicle traveling during this time, and I can't avoid it. I got to go work on a lake out near Lubbock, Texas. Really cool little private lake, about 90 acres. It's out there in the Cap Rock. And it's cool enough we can work on it, even though it's hot. It gets cool enough at night. And then from there, come back, drop off the electric fishing boat, and then head down to Running River Ranch. So I'm going to be in my truck, so we'll not be doing the broadcast next Wednesday. Also want to thank David Schneiderman for his sponsorship of this show as well with Easy Dock. All right, let's see here. Algae on top of the pond, 1 acre, average 4 feet dip, have an aerator running 24/7. Any advice to eliminate the algae, no fish kill yet. Let's see. You got algae on top of the pond. Your aerator is running 24/7. 1 acre pond. You know, I tell you what, this is going to sound a little goofy, but I've got a pond just like that, just a half acre. And as much as I hate to do this, I'm not going to put any algaecide into that small pond, because I've got about a 4-foot ring of algae going all the way around it. I'm growing bluegills in it in a hatchery situation. Well, I took a dadgum leaf rake and I raked out about half of it today. I didn't like it. It wasn't fun, but I pulled it out. And that removed the nutrients. And now I got to go back. I piled all that algae up, and it's just about dry because it's 100 here today. But I'm hoping I can get somebody to come help me do that around here, which I probably can. All right, so keep that aerator going from 9 at night till 9 in the morning, depending on where you are. If it gets cool at night, if your temperature gets down in the 60s and you're getting up in the low 90s, go ahead and run it 24/7. But if you're up around 98 to 100 and it's only dropping down to 80, run it from 9 at night till 9 in the morning, then turn it off. that'll blow those algae mats to the side. Now, most of the time when you see algae mats this time of year, they're dead. The ones that I raked up, we had a rainstorm, dropped the water temperature about 8 degrees, caused that algae to bloom. And if that's what's happened to you, we had a little freak storm blow up here about 7 or 8 days ago, a week ago. And I mean, we got 4 inches of rain, just bam, right there. Temperature dropped, the air temperature dropped, the pond temperature dropped 6 degrees overnight. That was enough impetus to create algae growth. It destabilized the water. So now my choice is to add some algicide, which I don't want to do that. I don't want to run the risk of killing any fish. So I just took a rake and raked a bunch out, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm 65. I'm overweight. It ain't fun. But so what? I did it. And you can too. I just don't like it. Okay, let's see here. Let me see what else we got going on here. Ed Brewer got Tractor Supply in Lexington, South Carolina. That's great. And now I know that they've had a Tractor Supplies. Some of the Tractor Supplies have stocked certain types of Aquamax fish foods. But if you'll go to your hometown Purina dealer, they can get all of them. So Ed, I'm glad you did that. That's good. Tom said, that's what I've been waiting for, 2 for 1 on the caps. There you go. Pond Boss and Texas Hunter. Let's see here. Ed, Purina dealers are $13 a sack cheaper. I didn't know that, but that makes sense. Jeff Thompson, seriously considering adding 30 to 40 pounds per acre of rainbow trout this winter in the upstate. Uh-oh, I lost it. In a 6-acre pond. It's the winter steroid. Some people say it is. Would you add multiple sizes, 5 inches, 7 inches, 9 inches? Thanks. If you're wanting to use rainbow trout to feed bass, I'd say stock those that are in that 7 to 9 inch size class. Some of those are going to grow up where you can eat them. Some of those are going to get consumed because now in the Carolinas, trout's not that expensive like it is in other parts of the country. So it makes sense that you could do that, but you want to be selective about which bass you're going to feed. If you stock 7 to 9 inch trout, you're going to be more likely to feed 2.5 pound bass and up. You know, plus some of those trout are going to grow up, and you get good numbers. A 7 inch trout, I think, is about 8 per pound. 9 inch trout's 4 per pound, something like that. So you're going to get a bigger head count out of that 40 or 50 pounds. So I'd say yes. All right, Chris Horsley, I seined my fathead minnow pond last weekend to add more minnows to my larger pond. I netted a couple of weird minnows that were slimy and had 5 to 7 inch little horns on their forehead. What kind of fish is that? That's a male fathead minnow. That's part of the reason they call it a fathead. When they're spawning, their face turns dark. They get these little tubercles, looks like little horns on top of their head. That's what they use to scrape off nest sites, like on rocks or wood or docks. So they'll use those tubercles to clean off a space, and where a female can go lay the eggs stick, and that space is going to be about as big around as $50. And so when you get those fish that look like that, those are the males, and they spawn till they die. Once they start spawning, they'll spawn over and over and over and over till they run out of themselves. They'll metabolize their food. Hey, Josie, good to see you. I don't feel bad. I appreciate the good wishes. I don't feel bad. I just got a little dry throat. I don't know what that is, but I've had it several days. Let's see here. Uh-oh, Travis, you know what? Golly, I might have to figure out how to broadcast next Wednesday. You guys are funny. All right, Tommy Garrett, get the feeling better. Thank you very much. All right, now, so I guess we do need to kind of start wrapping it up. We're at 7:18, and I want to go back through some of this due diligence stuff. Josie and Wayne, I have not talked to Walter. I'm presuming that they've been to your place. Now, Wayne and Josie are on this show every Wednesday, wherever they are, and I think they're together. Sometimes it's their Wednesday night date night, and they're watching it from a couple different places because of Wayne's job. But they've got a really, really pretty piece of property in Central Texas. And they got ambushed by bushy pondweed. By the way, I have seen more outbursts of bushy pondweed this year than I've seen probably in the last 10 or 12 years combined. So you guys aren't the only ones in that boat, which I know that's not a good consolation prize because you got bushy pondweed. But one of the things that they're doing is they're going to have it treated and take out some portion of it, maybe a third of it, and then see what happens and see if any more of it dies. Because what happens sometimes with bushy pondweed is you can treat a third of it, it dies, releases its nutrients, the water gets a plankton bloom, and then pondweed that's growing in 6 or 7 or 8 feet of water gets shaded out, and then that can die. I've seen that happen with milfoil all the time. That can happen with pondweed as well. So now the consequences, if they were to treat too much too fast and have too many plants, too much mass dying and rotting too quick, they could have a fish kill. So what they're trying to do is set the stage to get the bushy pondweed from covering about 75% of their pond to get it down to cover maybe 20%, where it's good habitat, and then this fall go analyze the fishery and see what they've got, because they've owned this property maybe for a year or a little bit more. So they're in the evaluation stage to figure out what needs to be done. So as you evaluate whatever your project is, evaluate it, get as much due diligence done as you can. Don't pay the dumb tax if you can help it. Now, we all pay dumb tax. We just need to limit the amount of dumb tax that you and I have to pay. So when I'm talking about due diligence, I'm talking about planning to build a lake, planning to thin the forest. Oh my gosh, I had a story I was going to tell you and I can't remember what it is. I got a better one though. I had a guy call me back, oh my gosh, this is a long time ago, and he wanted to build. Okay, Josie said, yep, was out last week, 30% better, coming out next week. Good. That's good. Anyway, this guy, okay, I'm going to answer this. Robert says, 8 grass carpet, a 2-acre pond, too many. It's only too many if it eats all your plants too fast. The only vegetation in the pond is about 3 feet from the bank in shallow areas. Originally stocked 10, but 2 wanted to eat fish food and got lead poisoning. Okay, I'll tell you this. As long as you've got habitat to take the place of what they're eating, then it's not too many. But if they're going to eradicate all the plant life you've got and you run out of habitat, then you need more habitat. Not more grass carp, but more habitat. So be ready to replace it. So anyway, where I was going, there's a man that, I love this story. He bought 1,000 acres. Listen to this. This is cool. He was in law school in the middle 50s. He signed a note on a piece of property, 1,000 acres. Think about that. You're in law school, you don't have a job, mommy and daddy aren't feeding you, and you sign a note to buy 1,000 acres of land, and your ultimate goal is you want to build a lake on it. And that's what this guy did. So what he figured out, and he had the courage to do it in his mid-20s, is he knew he could cash flow it because he bought it at a really good price. Of course, looking now, everything is a better price in the 50s. But he was able to go there on weekends and cut firewood and sell it in Dallas to barbecue joints and to homeowners that had fireplaces. And then he had a grazing lease with a local farmer that allowed him to make enough money to cover the taxes and pay the majority of the bank note. Now, how cool is that? So now we fast forward 40 years in the 90s, and he's ready to build that lake. Well, one thing he didn't do is he never managed the forest, and it's mostly post oaks with a whole bunch of other smaller amounts of hardwood trees, like hickory, pecan, white oak, some pretty good stuff that could make furniture. But the majority of the trees weren't very big. Now, yes, he cut a bunch in the 50s and the 60s, but after that, when he didn't need to, he let the forest go and just do what the forest does. So he decided he was going to build this lake, which was going to be about 50 or 60 acres, and he wanted to clear cut 50 or 60 acres and then thin out the remainder of the 1,000 acres, of which there was probably 600 acres that was forested. The rest was pasture, coastal Bermuda pasture, cough syrup. Yep, that helps. Woo! Clyde Mays, boys and girls. We're going to be friends in a minute. So anyway, he asked if I had any experience in forestry, and I said none, but you know what? I'll get on the phone. And I found a forester that worked for International Paper. I brought him out there and got to looking around. And he said, well, you know, right now, he said, your hardwood trees, we could use some of those for cross ties if they're big enough, and the rest would be for pulp. He said it's $3 a ton for pulp trees, $5 a ton for cross ties. So Fred asked him, that was the man's name, and I always remember him had a handlebar mustache and he carried a sidearm in case he saw a pig or something. And we're walking through the woods and he's talking to this forester and his right-hand man and Fred's son-in-law and me. and he said, well, just based on what you're seeing now, where I want to clear cut this 50 or 60 acres to build this lake and then thin the rest of this, what do you think that's worth? The guy said, well, it's worth probably $30,000 to $40,000. Well, Fred's getting ready to build a $500,000 dam, you know? And so I kind of see a quizzical look on his face. And there was a pretty nice sized post oak tree. And what he explained was they would come and cut it off at the ground. And then first they'd cut it off up high, or cut it off at the ground, drop it, then cut it up where it forked. And then that's the log they would take, and they would leave everything else behind. So they weren't going to cut up the limbs. They were going to leave all that there to rot in the forest, which takes years. So I just pointed and I said, let me ask you this. How much does that tree right there weigh? And it was a post oak tree that I bet you was 80 or 100 years old. He said, you know what? That tree would make a cross-tie tree, so it's worth $5 a ton. It's probably 1,000 pounds. I said, okay, let me get this right. And I said, you mean that tree is worth $2.50? Less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks in the 90s? And he looked at the ground and he said, yeah, that's what it's worth. So Fred looked at me, I looked at him, and that conversation was over. So then we went and found another forester who would come in and assess the value of the trees for a different market. Fred ended up selling the trees, thinning the forest, and he got $180,000 for his wood because he figured out the value in the right marketplace with the right forester. There's a living, breathing example of the dumb tax. And that's a true story. That happened. All right, let's see. I think we're about to the end here, and my voice hasn't completely left yet. Of course, this little bit of cough syrup's helping out. So, hey, you know what? You guys know the drill. If you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss, please do that. $35 a year. I see W.C. Thurman checking in from up there in Kansas. Good to see you there, Brother Thurman. Susie's coming to Texas before long. Hang out with my wife. That's going to be fun. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date and lasts a year. That Friday night date's gone after a few hours. Plus, it's full of nuggets. Good stuff that you can actually use. Help you be a better pond meister and a better steward of your ponds and lakes. Chris Blood tells me all the time I need to promote myself. I'm not good at that. If any of you out there are looking to build a new lake, or you just bought some property, or you have property, but you want to try to figure out what to do to make fishing better or make a better pond, drop me an email. And if I can help you, I will. If I can't, I'll refer you to somebody. You know, so, and that's the way I'm making my living nowadays. Editor job doesn't pay a lot. It pays enough, but not a lot. And so consulting work is now my gig. So listen, I really appreciate you guys checking in. I always love the audience. I love to hear your feedback. Love your questions. Keep them coming. So until next week, no, wait, I won't be here next week. Week after that, I'll see you then. Until then, adios.